Barbecue. Hey guys, today we're going to make some smoked salmon on the Masterbuilt 1050. These particular fillets were just pulled out of our deep freeze today. These were caught by my wife on a deep sea fishing trip up in Alaska, just off the coast of Homer. These particular salmon are called pink salmon. They're the most common salmon in that part of the Pacific Ocean. So we're going to go ahead and smoke these up today. One thing that's important to know about these fillets is that they're a little saltier than a store-bought salmon. The stuff you find at Costco or grocery stores is typically farmed salmon. These salmon have a little bit saltier flavor to them and also have lower fat content. So these will have to be treated a little bit differently, so we'll make some adjustments as we're cooking here today. So in order to prep salmon for a smoker, you have to brine the salmon. The brining process is not a same-day process. This is going to be something that takes a little forethought. You're going to want to do it at least one day ahead of time. Perfect world, I say 48 hours is really the right amount of time for a brine to properly set up a piece of salmon for a smoker. But you can do it in as little as 8 or 12 in a pinch. So for this, we're going to do about 24 hours. We're going to kind of land right in the middle. Most of what a brine does takes place at the beginning of the brining process, and sort of the impact tapers down to the end. So whereas that 48 hours might give you sort of a better finish on the fish, 24 hours is still really good so that we can get the right smoke on the fish. It can either be a dry brine or a wet brine. A wet brine will be water with salt in it, other spices, some herbs in it, sugar in it, and a dry brine will have no water, but it'll be those same ingredients. We're gonna go with a dry brine here today, so you'll see what that looks like. So you'll see when we put on the dry brine today, it will go in just like looking like salt and brown sugar. The purpose of those ingredients is to put sugar and salt in contact with the fish. Those are both ingredients that will draw water out of whatever they touch. It concentrates the flavor. That's what the brining process is meant to do. The other thing that the brining process does is it creates a hardened layer on the outside of the salmon. That hardened layer, I believe, is called a pellicule. Google that one, correct me if I'm wrong, leave something in the comments. But that pellicule creates sort of a hardened exterior on the top of this, and you'll see what that looks like in this video. And that hardened layer traps in the moisture, so as this smokes, it's not losing the remaining flavor that's in there and resulting in a dry piece of fish. I used to make these on my electric smoker. On the electric smoker, it's tougher because you can't go to those low temperatures. With the 1050 I've got outside, you can do it at much lower temperatures, so I'm really excited to see how these turn out. So we're going to get the internal temperature to approximately 150 degrees. The goal is to put as much smoke as you can on this and cook it as slowly as possible. My wife is going to be going to visit her grandparents at their cabin this week, so I know that her grandpa's a big fan of smoked salmon. Hey Sid. So this is going to be sent up there to Sid, but we'll of course take a little taste before we send it on its way. All right, let's get this brine started. Okay, I've got my fillets set up here. When they're caught in the wild, they leave the fin on the side of the fish so that when you have them in the freezer with other fish, you can tell what type of fish you're pulling out. So I just cut off those fins. Those are a really thin piece on the salmon, and you want a kind of healthily rounded out shape on the fillets, something that's pretty consistent. You've got to think about the thinner parts are going to cook faster than the thicker parts, so leaving a lot of that on there when it's really thin like it is by that fin leaves a very, very dried out piece of salmon. Get them nice and round, good healthy shape like this. One other thing that's worth noting, these fillets have the skin on. After these are cooked, we're gonna peel the skin right off. It'll also help keep some of the moisture in the fish. So I'm gonna put this side down on the smoker, so this will be the side facing the heat, protecting that fish up above to get that great smoke on it. For our brine, we're gonna keep things pretty basic. Brown sugar, kosher salt, garlic powder. I just want to call out one important thing to note. The type of salt that we're using here is kosher salt. This is the type of salt you want to be using. You don't want to use an iodized salt. Iodized salt is meant to be a table salt. Salt flavor in iodized salt is significantly more concentrated. If you use iodized salt instead of kosher salt, you will end up with an extremely salty product. So you mix your dry brine in ratios because the number of fillets that you're gonna do may vary, the size of the fillets is gonna vary, so it's a very simple ratio. A lot of recipes you see online will say 2 parts brown sugar to 1 part salt. I disagree with that. I think that creates a very salty product, and that's not just looking at wild caught salmon, that's looking at farmed salmon that you can buy in a store. Still just adds too much salt. Store-bought farm salmon, I'll do a ratio of 3 parts brown sugar to 1 part salt. But for this one, because these are so salty and because these are wild caught, we're gonna do 4 parts brown sugar to 1 part salt and 1/2 part garlic powder. So let's mix up some brine. We've got 4 parts brown sugar, 1 part salt, 1/2 part garlic powder. So I like to do this with my hands just so I can get rid of all those chunks in the brown sugar. Give this a mix till it looks consistent and smooth. All right, that looks pretty good. I know there's still some chunks in there. You guys will see what happens with those. Now let's get the fish in and lay this brine on it. Okay, so you want to use a large container, something that has a lot of surface area. It's better not to stack your salmon fillets. To start, we'll put a layer of this along the bottom because we want it to touch the salmon on all sides. So just lay a little consistent layer across the bottom that's probably 1/4 or 1/2 inch thick. Now, I like to lay the fillets meat side down, skin side up. With that, what's gonna happen, like I said, we're gonna see this form a syrup. And so we'll think of it as though we're almost marinating these. So the side that we want down in that marinade is our meat so it can absorb that flavor. Okay, so our fillets are in. Now we're just gonna lay the rest of our brine right across the top. Okay, so our salmon fillets are in there. Treat them like you're burying them in the sand. You don't wanna be able to see any of the salmon. If there's a little bit showing, it's not gonna be that big of a deal. One thing I forgot to show you, and this is really cool, and it demonstrates what the brining process does. So I just wanted to hold this fillet right now so you can see what this looks like. Very floppy, drops right down. So this is what the fillet looks like before the brining process. Always gotta burp it. Now we'll throw this in the fridge and we'll come back in 24 hours. See you then. It has been 24 hours. We are now gonna take a look at what that salmon's had time to do in our dry brine. So here's our salmon. Give you a look inside here. So not as much of the syrupiness as I expected to see or have seen in the past. That's probably due to the fact that we've got 2 fillets in here. I usually do more, but these being a special salmon that came from Alaska, I didn't want to screw them up. So we're going to try these on the smoker for the first time and make sure the method works as intended. So we'll pull these fillets out of here. And you can see that syrupiness on the bottom side of them. Makes sense that there's, I guess, a little less on the scale side here. So we'll clear as much of that off as we can. When you get rid of this, you do not want to put this in your sink. This will plug up your sink right away. It's okay to have a little bit on there because we are going to rinse these off, but you're going to want to throw the rest of the dry brine into the trash. One thing I want to show you right away is the texture of this piece of fish. You can already see it's a little stiffer. Let's get a quick reminder of what it looked like yesterday. Here's what the fillet looks like before the brining process. And here's what our fish looks like today. So we can see it's stiffened it right up. By taking that moisture out, you get a stiff piece of fish. When you buy smoked salmon in a store, it doesn't have any bend to it. It's stiff, just like this, and that's because of the brine. So I'm gonna take these 2 fillets out, wipe off as much as I can, give them a rinse in some cold water. All right, once you rinse off the fillets, lay them on some paper towels. You just want to dry them really good. Drying them off really good is what is going to get that pellicule to form. All right, now that we've dried these out, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the fan in the kitchen and let that run and let these sit out for about an hour. You don't want to dry them to the point where the meat's sitting out and spoiling. However, you do want to get it so it's very close to dry to the touch. Now, just using paper towels, we're pretty close to where we want to be, so we're going to let these sit out for an hour. All right, it's been about an hour. I don't know how much different these are going to look on camera, but when I touch this piece of salmon and rub my fingers together, there's barely any moisture. Is it perfectly dry? No. But does it need to be? No. So this is what we're trying to do. What the brining process has done, it's drawn out that water, it's concentrated the flavor, and it's formed the pellicule on top. Now to flavor my salmon, the way that I traditionally make it, it's got some spices on the exterior, and we need to make those spices stick now that the outside is dry. So to do that, I use honey. I put this honey in the microwave for about 10-15 seconds, makes it like water, very, very liquidy. So then I paint as thin of a layer as possible onto the outside of the salmon. Really spread it. The purpose again for this honey is to make our spices stick. That's all we need it for. This honey will also help keep some of the moisture in. It'll also help to give it a nice color. Putting a sugar on the outside like this should grab onto some of that smoke and really give us a great looking piece of salmon. All right, now that our honey is on there, we're gonna go ahead and put on our spices. It doesn't take much more than some fresh cracked black pepper to really give these things enough flavor. However, sometimes you can put on things like a little garlic powder, maybe a little onion powder, really anything that would be meant to complement a fish. But I tend to keep mine very basic and only put on cracked black pepper and a very, very, very light sprinkling of garlic powder. So that's what we're gonna do today. Now notice how thick the coat is on this one and how light it is on here. Both would be perfectly fine, but I really don't think you can put too much black pepper on these. So this is the consistency that I tend to shoot for. All right, so this is the right amount of black pepper from my perspective. Now we're ready to put on a little garlic powder. As I'm sprinkling, I really don't want to change the color of what we have on there right now. That's how light I want to keep this garlic powder, but it is just a nice complement to the pepper. All right, that's it. Let's get the smoker fired up. When you're smoking salmon, you want to go with a light smoke, not a bold smoke. So for our smoke today, we're going with apple. Fruit woods are generally the consensus. If you're using something to smoke fish, you do not want to taste more smoke than fish. A fruit wood will not overpower the fish. Applewood is what I use every time that I smoke salmon. For charcoal, Kingsford briquettes. Again, we want to keep the flavor light. All right, let's get this baby fired up. For salmon, you've heard me say it, low and slow. Low and slow is the way to go. Eventually, we want to take the internal temperature of this salmon to 150 degrees. So we're going to start at our lowest setting on here of 150 degrees. The key to this salmon is the smoke. So we are going to put in a lot of applewood, even though it's just for these 2 pieces of fish. Like I said, a lot of applewood. When you're smoking salmon, you have to put a lot of oil or cooking spray on your grates. That salmon skin sticks really easily, and it's got to sit on these grates for a very long time. So you hate to put in all the time, take the salmon off and have it just stick to all of your grates. Now that these are oiled up, we'll place the fillets onto the rack, get these bad boys outside. Temperature's settling in right about 150. We're at 153 right now, and I'm just starting to smell that apple smoke. That's the main thing that I want before I put this fish on. Something I'm going to try here today for the first time is the meat probe that comes along with the Masterbuilt 1050. You have these 4 notches right here where the probe plugs into. Then on the side of the unit here, you have this little hole that the probe slides through. So we're going to try and get this probe into one of these fillets. These fillets are fairly thin, so we'll see how well this works. But I do want to make sure that this probe is working and that this fish is not overcooked. So let's get this set up. All right, so I have my probe set into the thickest part of the salmon. To check our probe temperature, there's an icon of a probe on this top middle button. So we can press that probe, and that probe is currently reading 62 degrees. Just took the salmon off the smoker, way overestimated with my 6, 8, or 10 hour estimate. These are thinner fillets, should have been more cognizant of that. They went in at 4:30. Took them off at 7:30. They hit 1:48. That was a good enough time for me to take it off. The other motivation there was it was pouring rain outside, which is why I didn't show you guys when I was taking them off the smoker. But we've got them inside. Let's take a look. This is a completely different color than what I'm used to seeing for my electric smoker. 3 hours at 150, slowly reaching an internal temp of 148. The smoke that was billowing out of that thing, I wish I would have gotten more footage of that. I kept that hopper loaded with applewood through the whole smoke. So these bad boys got the whole treatment. After you take your salmon off of your smoker, you want to let it rest. It's sort of a volatile state at that point. Similar to other meats, like you'd rest a steak, you want to rest salmon. Remember, we took all the water out of this meat. We concentrated the flavor. If you cut into this too early, that remaining moisture, which is that concentrated flavor, you're going to lose it. And you're going to end up with a really dry piece of fish. So before I showed these to you here, I actually had these covered up. You don't want to wrap them. If you wrap them, they're going to steam more. They'll cook more. You don't want to do that. So what you want to do is maybe tent a piece of tin foil over the top. Or what I did, I just took a cookie sheet and laid it across the top of the salmon just like this. Air can still get out of the bottom. You see is a little bit of condensation that formed on the pan, but giving these a loose environment to cool down in is gonna make all that hard work really worthwhile. So let's try some. All right, so like I said, I'm sharing this with Sid, so I can only try a little bit. I wanna make sure a lot of this gets to the guy who this was being made for. So I like some of the drier pieces. So looking at this fatter end, skinnier end, it almost forms like a jerky, like a smoked salmon jerky. So I'm just gonna break off a little bit of the tail end of this fillet. Remember I said that skin peels right off. So on the back side, there's our skin. We can just break this piece. There's the skin, there's the salmon. Separates right off of there. So a little bit left. I'll get it off though. Don't worry, guys. I love these chewy pieces. The smoke here did a number on this fish. I like store-bought smoked salmon because you're typically buying it from a place that does it professionally. They package it up, it sits for a couple days in that package. The flavor really matures with smoked salmon over time. So don't feel like you're not getting fresh salmon if you're not eating it the same day you take it out of a smoker. Nice and peppery. That garlic I put on there you can taste. I just put that little bit. You guys saw me do it. I'm really impressed with the smoke. The smoke that I'm able to get on this. Like I said, you can do that with an electric smoker. So with the 1050, I loaded up that hopper and I actually went out one time before it was done. You saw how much I put in, and I put in even more. It was really billowing out, and you can taste that smoke and what it did to this fish. Perfect. We're gonna have to do more smoked salmon. It's healthy, it's delicious, it's easy. I love doing it. And it's better to do in big batches. And I know a lot of you guys out there like it, so I know I'll have takers if I make too much. It might also be fun to do a side-by-side comparison of a store-bought salmon with wild-caught salmon while we still have some. So maybe I'll do a video about that. That should be fun. All right, cool. Well, there's the salmon. Thanks for watching another Jack and Blue barbecue video, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Thanks for checking out my video. For more content like this, look me up on YouTube at Jack and Blue Barbecue.